when we talk about modern feminism, we have to begin in the United States. Many people in the world, when they think of American imperialism, they think of it based on its military might. Now, of course, while the US has certainly exercised military power across the world, the effects of its cultural dominance is less noted. Now, due to the cultural, economic, and social power of America, American feminism is the most influential form of feminism in the world. No movement has shaped gender conversations around the world as much as American feminism. It has created real protections for women, but it has also produced some significant backlash, especially in cultures where its sort of confrontational and adversarial style clashes with local norms. So let's start with a definition of what American feminism is. American feminism is a rights-based adversarial movement that frames women's liberation through legal claims, grievance language like harm, injury, or oppression, and institutional activism. It developed in 4 distinct waves, so 4 different periods where American feminism evolved. I'm going to do a wonderful little background change here to show you the different waves. So the first wave focused on women's suffrage, or the right to vote. This occurred in 1920 when the 19th Amendment recognized women as full political citizens with the right to vote. The second wave was in the 60s and 70s when women pushed for reproductive rights, workplace equality, and access to all the different professions, some that they were locked out of. This is also where the sexual revolution began, followed by sexual harassment legislation. The third wave was where intersectional feminism was born, where the idea that gender cannot be separated from race, class, and sexuality. It broadened the moral scope of feminism, and it brought more diverse voices into the conversation. And this was also when the gender and women's studies departments began being formed in universities all across America. The fourth wave arrived through social media and the Me Too movement. Millions of women, they publicly disclosed experiences of harassment and assault. It created a huge pressure on corporations, governments, and public institutions to address patterns of abuse, especially by men in positions of authority. In the 2010s, the fourth wave feminism also fused with gender identity ideology. So this is the stuff about trans rights, non-binary identity, and gender fluidity that went from university campuses out into mainstream feminist activism. It did create new alliances and broaden the movement, but it also created new political and cultural tensions. So the next stage, I'm going to change my background. I'm doing this background. Before, I was going to do this background, but it looked like all the expressions are exploding out of my head. So I thought maybe it might be better to just change and do this background instead, where it looks a little bit more neutral. So thank you. I just saw a nice little laugh there. So unlike European feminism, which was rooted historically in labor unions, Latin American feminism, which started through nationalist movements, African and Asian feminism, which was rooted in religious form or anti-colonial struggles, American feminism came out of universities, came out of academic institutions. In fact, the core vocabulary, the main expressions that spread around the world, was generated inside universities, in academic papers, activist seminars, and in the gender and women's studies classes. Now, the vocabulary that I'm going to be reading soon, they served as emotional expressions of female frustration, empowerment, and group identity. And over time, this vocabulary became an ideology. Now, ideology is very powerful, especially when it's attached to feelings like danger and trauma. I'm going to read a list of the 13 most popular terms that were popularized by American feminist academia. I'm going to give some definitions, and then whether there's any empirical evidence supporting or challenging these phrases. To save on time, I'm only going to give a short summary of each one. More detail and more phrases. It turns out there's a lot of phrases that make up what American feminism is. So there's much more phrases and more detail, and that's all in the book that is the foundation for this discussion group, Warrior Woman. While the next section has some critiques of the way American feminism has created a language and redefined certain phrases, this is not a critique of American feminists. Personally, my life has been very positively affected by many American feminists. As a proud American, before and after the, for those of you who don't know, I had an eco-feminist community in Hawaii, which I ran for 14 years. My primary clientele were university-educated American feminist women. I've had many great conversations, friendships, and wonderful women who I know, having lived in America for 24 years, who are American feminists. So the critique that I'm about to read and some of the interpretations, it's about the ideology, not the people. So the first phrase, and some of you can raise your hands if you've heard of some of these phrases, and there'll be a little discussion afterwards. But the first phrase is toxic masculinity. Feel free to raise your hands if you've heard. Yep, I see hands being raised. So yes, so the definition of toxic masculinity is men are taught to be aggressive, dominant, controlling, and unemotional. These learned behaviors can lead to violence and unequal treatment of women. Now, the empirical evidence, and with the empirical evidence for each one of these phrases, I'm just going to give a little short snippet. There's a lot more detail in the book with all the bibliography and everything that shows the backing for the studies. But with toxic masculinity, cross-cultural psychological studies on personality traits in 62 nations show that aggression and risk-taking are partly biological. Not all masculine traits correlate with negative outcomes. Strong male role models can actually reduce violence in boys. Now, the second phrase is patriarchal privilege, or male privilege, or systemic sexism. These three phrases, they're all related. And basically, they all boil down to the definition of men benefit from a structural hierarchy in society that advantages them at every institutional level. Sexism persists throughout institutional rules that produce unequal outcomes for women. So that's the definition. The evidence is that men also face structural disadvantages. Men have higher suicide rates, harsher criminal sentencing. 93% of workplace deaths are men. And this kind of suggests that gendered privilege is not uniform. It varies by context. For example, in many domains, like in education, women are now outperforming men. Women earn 60% of university degrees in the US. Young women out-earn young men in a number of major cities. And so it is a lot more nuanced than just a systemic sexism that males have all the advantages. Third phrase is a rape apologist. And the definition is anyone who questions accusations or emphasizes due process, like a legal trial under the law in rape trials. Basically, anyone who questions an accusation reinforces a culture that excuses sexual violence. Now, the empirical evidence is that there are false accusations. They range from 2 to 10%. It's small, but not trivial. And many legal scholars, they argue that when you presume guilt, you erode civil liberties, and you also cause a male backlash, which doesn't necessarily reduce sexual assault rates. Now, the fourth phrase is mansplaining or man-interrupting. And those ones are when men condescendingly explain things or interrupt women because of the way society is, socialized dominance, that men interrupt women more because the patriarchal communication norms devalue female voices. Empirical evidence, studies show that men interrupt men more than women in many mixed conversations, and also high status women interrupt low status men at similar rates. So it challenges the notion that gender is the primary reason for this concept called mansplaining. Now, another phrase would be emotional labor or invisible labor. Definition that women disproportionately perform unrecognized work at home, emotional work, and housekeeping and things like that. And while empirical evidence, it's true, women do more household work, but men perform the majority of physically dangerous or demanding labor, resulting in more than 90% of workplace deaths. Emotional work also varies widely by personality and not gender. So let me pause again for a little second. If anyone has any comments or questions before I go on. All right. Pandre, go for it.
So I haven't heard, I only recognize the first one that you talked about. I really haven't heard of the others framed that way. Like we know what they are, especially having been married and having a family. The last one, you do a ton of work that's completely, I mean, for me, unrecognized by my late husband. Like, what did you do all day? I was like, are you kidding me?
Right.
All that plus having a job. But I haven't heard, so I recognize them after you describe it, but I haven't heard the technical terms you use. So that was really interesting.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Well, a lot of these terms, what's happened, and when I go into the next stage, they all started in universities and they've spread, and it's a lot of people around the world, they first get it through the university system. So some of them, you're right, haven't spread into the broader culture yet. But like toxic masculinity, that's one of those that did start off within academia and spread throughout the world. And there's some other ones that will come up that you'll recognize that have spread out into the broader world. All of them started in universities. And so
do you think that by labeling it, by creating the name for it, that it adds emphasis to it or draws attention to it, maybe unnecessarily?
You've kind of you're reading my mind. That's exactly where there is a little bit. That's where I'm going with it, and I'll
Okay.
be presenting some evidence to show exactly that. So you are 100% correct, and you are definitely guessing the direction where I'm going with this. So I'm going to read out a few more, and so another one is rape culture. Rape culture. Society normalizes sexual violence through jokes, media, and institutional practices. So, like, for instance, if a stand-up comedian is joking about rape, that's kind of like giving almost permission or setting a stage for this thing called rape culture. Now, in terms of empirical evidence, sexual assault rates have declined dramatically since the 1990s across the US. America has stricter laws and higher reporting rates than most countries. So while problems still exist, it is not culturally normalized anymore. It is definitely very frowned upon. Now, number 7, consent culture and enthusiastic consent. The definition is that every sexual interaction between a male and a female should require explicit, verbal, and ongoing consent. Now, this one is an American feminist norm that assumes that sexual communication between adults, it must be explicit, it must be verbal, it must be continually affirmed. So it's like, may I touch your, I'm going to say left breast, for instance, or each stage of the interaction should have a communication. Now, in much of the world, Muslim countries, Asia, Africa, sexual consent and sexual interaction is shaped by modesty norms and nonverbal courtship scripts. For instance, where I am in India, if anyone's seen a Bollywood movie, that's how consent is many times in India. Like, the woman dances, the man is kind of like trying to move in, she runs away and dances again, he runs in. There's no verbal, but it's this kind of dance. And an Indian Bollywood movie is very much a metaphor for how consent is over here. It's not an explicit verbal aspect. And in most parts of the world, there's literally no verbal consent. There's a whole different other set of norms. So it's kind of an imposition on other cultures when the assumption is that this Western idea and American idea of sexual consent should be explicit and verbal, because it literally doesn't happen in other countries. Now, another expression, which I'm sure some of you all have heard, is body positivity or fat acceptance. Now, this is a feminist concept. It's a political feminist concept that treats fatness as morally and medically neutral. It interprets beauty standards and weight stigma as tools of patriarchal and capitalist oppression. It prioritizes bodily autonomy and lived experience over traditional public health narratives. Now, when it comes to the evidence, research does support the idea that unrealistic beauty standards, they increase body dissatisfaction, eating disorders, and anxiety. However, long-term benefits are inconsistent. Evidence does not support the strongest activists claim that health risks are associated with obesity are socially constructed. Large-scale studies, they show that obesity does have higher rates of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and reduced lifespan. So the data suggests a dual reality. It does in some ways reduce shame, which improves mental health, but it does deny the fact that there are health costs in the fat acceptance movement. Another phrase which might be familiar to people is believe all women. Women's statements about sexual assault should be presumed credible due to systematic patriarchal disbelief. Now, when it comes to the evidence, studies of police reports show that women are believed in the vast majority of cases. Legal systems require evidence precisely so that they can prevent miscarriages of justice. But women are believed. In the past and in other cultures, there is a discrepancy. So in some cultures, especially very traditional cultures, there is a tendency to maybe not believe the women. But in Western societies, there is a tendency to believe the women. Internalized misogyny. Now, definition is when a woman is only criticizing feminism because she has absorbed the patriarchal culture, the sexist beliefs from society. It frames her disagreement as a psychological defect rather than a valid opinion. When it comes to the evidence, many studies show that women disagree with mainstream American feminism because of ideological, cultural, moral, or experiential reasons, not because of unconscious self-hatred. Now, the final two, trigger warning. I'm sure people have heard that one. And that is a notice given before content is shown on a movie or a TV show that may provoke traumatic or emotional distress, especially for those with PTSD. Now, this phrase was born from university-educated feminist bloggers discussing violence against women. When it comes to the evidence, studies show that trigger warnings do not necessarily reduce distress or help, like rape survivors, for instance. There is evidence to suggest that they actually may heighten anxiety by reinforcing vulnerability expectations. So it's like you get a trigger warning that something's about to be shown on TV, and that already gives you the anxiety that it's going to be coming up somewhere in the TV show or whenever it's going to happen. And the final one is safe space. And a safe space is a designated environment where individuals, especially those women or those from marginalized groups, are protected and shielded from discrimination or discussion of any topic that could feel harmful to them. Now, when it comes to the evidence, there is a lot of evidence. One book, The Coddling of the American Mind, which argues that the rise of this safetyism culture, it undermines emotional resilience and intellectual robustness. It also acts as a chilling suppression of open discussion about potentially controversial issues. So there is the evidence, the evidence doesn't really support the contention. Now, those are just 13 of the phrases. There are other really big phrases like sexual harassment and Me Too, but those had such a huge effect on America and in the world in general that those will be discussed in separate sections because there's a lot more detail around those, especially those two expressions of sexual harassment and Me Too. So let me take another pause here and check in. I do have maybe what I'd like to do before I ask if you have any comments or questions is there's 4 questions I have. How familiar are you with regards to these words? Do you have a favorite phrase out of the list that I read, or a least favorite phrase? In other words, one that you think had a positive effect on society and one that you think may have had a negative effect on society. Have you ever used these words or online or in conversation? Pandre, go for it.
Yeah, well, what I'm big, my pet peeve is the body positivity. And and promoting unhealthy lifestyles. So this is like, you go to the store, the department store, and you've got fat models, you've got, sorry if this offends you, but you've got obese mannequins and magazines with these obese women, and this is not a sustainable lifestyle. So it's like rewarding people for abusing themselves. And somebody even went to the doctor, and somebody who was obese, and she was mad because the doctor, actually this was my own orthopedic surgeon, he got a bad review because he refused to do knee surgery for her. He said, I'm not going to do this knee surgery unless you lose like 100 pounds. She's like, well, you're discriminating. He's like, no, because you are not going to be able to walk. The surgery is not going to do anything for you. And he was, got this bad review, and he was harassed because he told her the truth. People go to their doctor saying, what's wrong with me? And they're like, well, you're obese, you're fat. Obese is a medical term. This is not like I'm trying to hurt your feelings. And now they're saying you can't call somebody obese. It's a medical term. This blows my mind that they're rewarding and coddling people like you said.
I 100% agree. As a fellow American, I mean, we live in America. We've seen how it is all over the country, this movement. It's actually not even just in feminism anymore. It's on the right and on the left, Democrats, Republicans. There is this huge philosophy almost that it's like, it's my right to be the way this way, and without
you can, because you can eat what you want, but then don't expect your doctor to tell you that you're okay when you're not okay because of something like your weight. Don't take it out on other people. But for me, I'm a regular sized person, and I can't find my size in the store. I have to order online because my size is not available. That's ridiculous.
Emma, go for it.
My main interest would be about the consent, because it's really gloomy. I don't know if it's the right word, but it's, and as in a psychoanalytical point of view, this is a main subject. And you talked about Indians, and I was wondering, I don't know if you hear the dog, sorry, it's really annoying. How did you get these conversations all over the world? I'm interested in this.
So basically, when I've been speaking with people in non-Western societies, like with Africans and Indians, Muslim people, this concept of articulated consent, that it's clear, it's almost non-existent. What I've found is it's mainly in countries that had a sexual revolution, where women achieve. Go ahead.
Women and men? Can you give examples?
Of which one?
For example, in non-Western countries.
So, for instance, with Indians, I've had this conversation multiple times, and that's where one of them said to me the concept of like a Bollywood movie, because it was a perfect way to describe it. Like, the girl is kind of dancing and doing that little bit of a tease in the dance, and the man runs up to her and he's dancing, and then she runs away again. And so it's this dance, but it's never articulated. And with a Filipino woman, I remember having a conversation, and she was like, we never say, like, I want you to touch me, I want you to do this or do that. We never say that. What we do is we smile, or we just show our shyness, and we're kind of, it's a little, it's non-verbal. It's this unverbal way of expressing it. An African woman said the same thing, where it's like, she's like, it's that we don't stop it from happening, kind of thing. you know, and those are gray lines, as you well know, those are gray lines, but it's also cultural. Like this concept of saying confidently, I want you to make love to me, for instance, you know, it's very strongly a Western concept. Many other women, they literally don't have the language to say that. It's more that they allow it to happen, or they smile, or they act coy in a sort of a way that's saying yes, but not really. And so that's the, you know, that's the way. Holly, first, does that answer your question, Emma, before I go on to Holly?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this way longer. So for now, it does.
It is. That one is a very touchy subject for sure. Holly?
Yes, I was just going to touch on the one that you spoke of. I think it was called internalized masculinity. I had not heard the term before, but I found it.
Misogyny.
Misogyny. That's what it was. Okay. I found that one fascinating because I am someone who chooses to live a more traditional lifestyle. And I have, in so many words, been accused of that. And so it's interesting to know there is a term to go with that, because for me, my thought is, it is my choice. It's not because I feel forced. I would not agree, you know, to being forced into that. That's not okay with me. But I think it's something, like, as anyone should be able to choose how they wish to live. So that was fascinating to me.
And I agree with you 100%, because as a person of color who has grown up in the West and who loves the West, I love being American. I also am British, and I love being British as well. And I love Western ideals of free speech and free expression, free association. And I defend the West a lot. And I've many times been called or accused of internalized racism, like that I'm kind of racist against myself, you know, because I'm not adopting a sort of victim mindset that I'm a person of color, so therefore I'm marginalized, and that I'm suffering under like systemic racism and things like that. And I've been called a white apologist, and like a number of names where I'm
I
like,
believe it.
really? Like, I can't believe it. Just because I defend Western values and that I like, many Western concepts. I mean, I love my color, I love my heritage, but I love the West. And yes, I know exactly what you mean when it comes to that sort of accusation. 100%.
Thank you.
What makes this language of American feminism? So it didn't stop at the American border. These terms went all over the world. And what makes American feminism so unique is that because of American dominance of these 5 major pathways, they spread to where they became global speech norms, especially among the younger university educated elites in countries like India, many Western countries, where I've heard these expressions. Where I am in India right now, I've spoken to a few Indians, and a number of those expressions that I've just read out, Indians, young people are familiar with them. And one of the ways that that spread is through American universities. So elite American universities such as Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia, and Berkeley, they dominate global academic publishing, and they set intellectual norms. Research produced in these universities dominates what is considered legitimate knowledge. Because English is the operating language of global academia, feminist theories, such as these expressions, developed in American universities, and then they spread through peer-reviewed journals, international conferences, and graduate programs worldwide. Many of these feminist theories, they arrived in other countries as ready-made concepts. So places like England and Canada, they just arrived in because it was already English. But in other places like French-speaking countries or others, they literally just use the original word. So for instance, toxic masculinity, I've heard that phrase with so many different accents. Toxic masculinity in French, in German, I've heard it, Indian people who've said it, and they literally just use the American phrase and the American meaning without even having to translate it. And it's like, wow, to see how it spreads. And because I'm traveling and I have these conversations, I really have noticed, especially among young people, how these concepts have spread. Now, the other way that these concepts have spread is American dominance of social media. Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, Tumblr, TikTok, and the US-driven influencer culture has become amplifiers for this language. Hashtag toxic masculinity, hashtag believe all women, hashtag me too. They've spread all over the place. Now, there are psychological reasons why these phrases spread so fast through social media. They're simple, while reality is complex. They offer comfort, especially after someone has gone through trauma or conflict. They create group identity and belonging. And many influencers, they do profit from viral emotional content represented by these phrases. The third way that these phrases spread around the world is Hollywood and US streaming media. America is the dominant cultural export of Hollywood around the world. Toxic masculinity has been used in interviews about Marvel films, Netflix documentaries, late night talk shows. Rape culture has appeared in American TV series, which are shown around the world, like SVU, Special Victims Unit. Netflix, Amazon Prime, and YouTube all have international audiences in the hundreds of millions. And American feminist vocabulary is spread in all of them. Stand-up comedy, dramas, teen series, celebrity interviews. The Hollywood machine has been a very powerful amplifier of these words. The fourth way that they spread is human rights groups, the United Nations, many non-governmental organizations. They all adopt the American terminology. So Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Planned Parenthood Global, they've all adopted these phrases, the American language, and it's spread through those international organizations. Systemic sexism, patriarchal privilege, all of these phrases went through many international organizations. And they do it as part of gender training, development programs. That's why even small NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations in India or Kenya, they use these phrases. And the fifth one is American dominance of news media. So these American ideas and phrases have spread globally through American dominance of media. CNN, the New York Times, Washington Post. All of these are not just American media outlets, but international. And many of these outlets, they prefer dramatic slogans because they attract attention. And these simplified phrases are easily absorbed by journalists who are seeking compelling narratives, moral clarity, and audience engagement. Many journalists will use these terms without, just as neutral descriptors rather than theories that could be contested. And then through constant repetition, these slogans harden into just the truth, into assumed truths. And so this final section is the conclusion. Now, these types of phrases, and as I said, I only gave you 13. There are many, many more. They do help people to articulate their feelings. They give some people a sense of belonging, but they don't describe the world. When you examine these phrases, several patterns stand out. Their origins are all American. They're shaped by elite universities, not by global historical experience, the working class, or poor people. These phrases rely heavily on emotional interpretation, not consistent empirical evidence, cross-cultural data, or biological science. American feminist vocabulary offers identity, emotional certainty, and moral righteousness. They often frame personal discomfort as political oppression, encouraging a worldview where feelings become truth. With few exceptions, these phrases of American feminism do not recognize any positive contributions that men have made towards women's welfare, safety, and security. Instead, they tend to portray men as inherently threatening. These phrases oversimplify gender dynamics. They ignore cultural variation, and they suppress dissent through moral accusations of either sexism, bigotry, or phrases like internalized misogyny. So it's not that it's a complete critique of American feminism, but when the words of one society dominate the global conversation, they make entire models of gender relations disappear. These terms are often treated as universal truths, despite originating from a very American cultural, economic, and ideological milieu. The ideology of American feminism has led to some positive outcomes, but definitely some negative outcomes for women, men, and children, both in America and across the globe. And as we will see in later presentations, other cultures have adopted policies, framings, and language related to feminism and male-female relations that are actually more harmonious for men, women, and children and society. And then, of course, there are other cultures that have adopted models that lead to worse outcomes. So with Yin-Yang feminism, we begin with the idea that men and women are complementary forces, biologically, socially, and sexually. Instead of treating masculinity as inherently dangerous, it recognizes masculine energy as protective when supported by healthy social structures. Instead of elevating female fear as the defining truth of gender relations, it honors female strength without denying vulnerability. A yin-yang framework also invites men into the conversation, not as suspects, but as partners. It doesn't require slogans. Yin-yang feminism does not silence inconvenient truths, and it doesn't fear biological realities. It begins where real life begins, in the messy, uncertain, and contradictory experiences of actual human beings. And that is it. Thank you for your time. And now I'm happy to hear any last thoughts or comments. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the clap there. Anyone have any last comments to say before we close up? And thanking you for your time.
Thank you. I feel like you gave a name and a gathering to so many ideas that I have and that I had recently when I don't feel that much feminist anymore. Like not the way not the way I grew up with, because I was at university I was really brainwashed in a way at some point when I was in Dublin. I was in feminist society, and I'm in a group, and I was really angry, and then like it changed through what I wrote about psychoanalysis.
Mhm.
And a lot of what you say is what I've started to read. That is a bit controversial, but I find it interesting. So and also, I mean, I never thought that far. I got a bit angry and annoyed, let's say. So I never thought that far. But now, having a historical and worldwide point of view is helping me a lot, also to see clear about why I am like this in this time of time period, 2025. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you very much. That is precisely why I'm doing this discussion group, because it is something that, like, for my entire life, it's almost like I've been feeling different parts of an elephant as a blind man and not making the connection. And now at this point in my life, I'm finally seeing connections. And because I have traveled in the world, seeing the effects, and working in women's issues my entire adult life, it has really given me a perspective where I'm like, wow, this is something really big that no one's talking about. And so what I'm trying to do with this discussion group and with the book is to start to stimulate a bit of a global conversation so that we can find a way, because as you said, many women are angry, many men are unhappy, and there is this kind of a separation that is going on between the genders across the world. And I would like to play a role or a little voice in trying to bring a yin-yang perspective of like, hey, there is ways that we can be harmonious again and that we can enjoy each other's energies. So thank you. I appreciate that, Emma.
I was literally about to say that I've never seen such a harmonious take on feminism, and I love it.
Wow. I so appreciate that. I'm always a little bit nervous because you can imagine being a guy talking about feminism. It's
Right,
always
right.
like.
No, you've got the right idea. I love this. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you. I really do appreciate that.